what's up, Vox and Hops heads? I'm Matt, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops podcast, brought to you by Sound Talent Media, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians to talk about their lives, music, and craft beer. I hope you guys have been having a great week. I most certainly have been. It's Friday, people. We did it. We got through another week. December of 2020 is right around the corner. It's an unbelievable thought that we're almost through this very, very complicated year. And I'm excited to see what 2021 has in store for the whole world. I'm super stoked to present this week's Vox&Hops Unsigned Gem. Today I will be featuring a band called The History of Flying Objects. Pavlo, the vocalist guitarist of this band, and I played in a band together for many, many years called The Era Of, and this is his new project, and I'm very, very stoked to share this track with you right now. Get ready, people. This is Dark Tides on today's Vox&Hops Unsigned Gem. I love how much Pavlo has progressed with his vocals. When I was in the Era Of with him, he was always very, very shy about his vocals, but look where he is now. I am super stoked and proud of him. If you enjoyed this track from The History of Flying Objects, please go and check out and support them via the links which I have provided in the description of this podcast. On today's Vox&Hops episode, I am with Philippe-Alexandre Gendron of McAuslan Brewing. Get ready, people. This is Vox&Hops episode number 207.
I warn you, what you are about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Today I'm with Philippe-Alexandre Gendron of McAuslan Brewing Company, and it is a pleasure to be with you. Some people might say, this looks familiar. Matt, have you done this before? We have had a conversation before, but it wasn't for a Vox and Hops episode. It was for Le Mondial de la Bière's roundtable discussion, which just came out recently. And I had such a good time with you there that I wanted to go deeper and to chat with you because it turns out you are a metal brewer. So simple conversation, which is very complex, which I kicked that roundtable off with. I'm going to kick it in your way again. Is how have you been coping with 2020?
I'm not gonna lie, 2020 has been rough. Luckily enough, we've also had quite a few really good beers coming around, so that's been helping a lot. Um, Otherwise, I would say I have been coping with all of that. I tend to bury myself in work. That's something, but being a head brewer for a fairly big brewery, it's something. There's always something to do. There's always more stuff more projects that we need to work on. So that's something that's been, even though 2020 has been rough and has been hitting us pretty hard as an industry as a whole. Um, we've had a lot of projects, a lot of new things to work out and things to, okay, hey, how we're going to do this, how we're going to do that. And then eventually you just, wait, how many hours have I been here today? Okay, it's time to go home a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, 2020 has been bit of a roller coaster so far, to say the least. And some good things are coming out of that too. I mean, we're here tonight, so yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm just curious, coming from having spoken to some other brewers out there. Now, you guys are a monster brewery in comparison to a lot of the smaller brew pubs that are out there, which need that walk-in clientele to survive. So some of the bit of a different thing with McAuslan Brewing Company is that you guys are a giant that already has a crazy distribution, and that is already a
Yeah.
big part of your business.
Yeah. So, sorry, what was your question there? I'm a little I missed that a little bit, but if I can go on to that a little bit actually. Yes, and luckily enough, for us, being huge, well, compared to a lot of smaller players, we've been able to keep ourselves afloat, because we produce in bottles and cans and kegs. Well, kegs not really right now because all the restaurants are closed.
Okay.
But being in part of that second wave red zone thing. But even at the beginning of March, when all of that happened, we had to stop our kegging line essentially, and that's, even though we're a big player, this is also a big part of our business. Not only for all the bars and restaurants that serve our products, but we also have the brew pub, well, the L'Annexe Saint-Ambroise, which is located on the side of our brewery, and also the terrace. So this is, we have discussed a little bit when I was talking about the Mondial. This is like we're not only producing a lot and keeping ourselves afloat, but we also have contact with the clients in by ourselves, by the on site as well, a little bit. Well, if you can say that. And so it's a big part of our business because this is something that we've been known for. It's the direct contact with the people. Like, fun enough, like I'll be out there on the terrace or at the pub, and like I'll be there and talking with clients. This is something I do on a regular basis. So the whole, being a bigger brewery, sure we are, and we've been able to probably keep ourselves afloat and navigate through 2020 a bit better or a bit easier than others. But even there, this whole situation is still impacting us quite a bit. It's I think we had touched that a little bit too last time when it is, whether we want it or not, people being stuck at home, they don't necessarily, like, surprisingly enough, our beer sales have not been going down, but there's still a little bit of, not that I want to say they haven't gone down, they've slowed a little bit. And whereas our bigger clients, for instance, like the dépanneurs, the grocery stores, they're still ordering out, but there's a lot of things that, like, say for a lot of restaurants, they're not going to get kegs, they're also getting bottles, and those were bottles that were not coming back for a while. So we've been having all sorts of issues and all sorts of puzzles with that. But overall, yeah, I guess I could say that we've gone a little bit easier than some of the other smaller players. But then again, yeah, I don't know where I was going to go with that.
But that you covered what I was leading towards, and it's true. I
Yeah.
hadn't thought about the massive amount of kegs that you guys are normally brewing and filling and sending out to restaurants, bars across the province, let alone
Oh,
just
and
here in
in Ontario as
Montreal.
well. We do export to Ontario as well.
Awesome.
this is all stuff that, well, for now it's not happening. So
Now I have a love affair with McAuslan Brewing Company because I've spoken on a podcast a few times. I don't believe I told you that night at Le Mondial's roundtable discussion was that McAuslan was the first craft beer that I really got into, and it stems down to when I moved out. I left Two Mountains. I came to Montreal with my wife, then girlfriend, now wife, and I would go to the grocery store and, looking at, best quality for price and coming home with a product that she wouldn't get too upset of me coming home with beer yet again. I was a child that used to drink, Molson Canadian, Molson Export mostly. And then I discovered this mix pack with Griffon and the pale ale from Saint Ambroise, and of course the little lucky magic diamond that would let me bring that 12 pack into the house a few times a week was the apricot ale.
yeah.
Because that was for her and she liked it. So from there, it stemmed from there. And then in that mix pack, there was that pale ale, which was probably one of the first hop forward beers that I ever enjoyed. And I really got addicted to that. At the time, I thought it was a soapy taste, but it's I know that it's just hops at this point. And to the point where I became a craft beer enthusiast. And when it was time for me to buy the beer for my wedding, because we had a room like that where we could bring all the alcohol, I bought a bunch of cases of the Saint Ambroise Pale Ale. So that's why I'm very excited to have a chat with you.
That's super cool, actually. Wow, I didn't know that. I mean, you had alluded a bit of being a long-term client, but I hadn't figured out, hadn't understood that way. That's really, really nice.
Absolutely, and it continues with Crypt Shop C. My guitarist Chris Donaldson had his wedding reception at your Lanex. No.
Yes, what is the pub that's beside the brewery?
Yes, it had his wedding reception at Lanex.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
And we hung out there. It was in February, and you guys had your Russian Imperial Stout on tap that night. It was completely dangerous and amazing.
Was that last year?
No, it was 2 or 3 years ago, probably even longer. Years have disappeared in my life. But we were drinking Russian Imperial Stouts all night. That is where, as you were saying, that you can come out and have a chat with the clientele. That's where I tasted your session for the first time. So it's very interesting to go to either the Lanex or the Terrasse, and it's always been it's a huge part of Montreal. So I'm very excited to be with you. Take me to your first beer, Philippe-Alexandre. Do you remember the first beer you ever drank?
Oh wow. I mean, if I had to say, the first beer I ever tasted was probably some sort of, I would say, a Wildcat from like decades ago. I didn't really like that. Let's just put it that way. I think it was my father and my grandfather. It was just like, hey, you're a man now, so have a beer. I'm like, what's this? Oh man, that's not good. What's going on with that? But after that, I would say when I really started drinking, getting into the craft beer industry, I got into which kind of everyone's gateway beer is a lot of the Unibrew products. I think Montrent and so that moved it, which was, I would say, probably one of the beers that those two are probably two of the beers that I've had the most before I started working as a brewer myself. Those were sort of my gateway into the world of beer. Everything like, hey, this is pretty good. The beer is actually fantastic. It's not all Molson and Budweiser. That doesn't. I don't want to start throwing rocks at the bigger guys, but it's beer that tastes beer, and you're sure that when you crack one, it's going to taste like beer. You know what to expect. But in terms of taste, in terms of all the stuff that's out there in terms of flavors, they're not the top side. They're not on the top side of everything. Just the plant here. I am a craft brewer, so I will. I tend to, defend my side of the industry a little bit. And on that note, that's what's got me started into down the path of the craft beer industry and getting into really liking beers. And then I started being the guy in my group of friends at that time. It was just like, hey, I bought this beer at the grocery store. How about we taste it and see what's going on with that? discovered a bunch of different things from in rapid succession from all the McAuslan product, all the Boreal product, all the other smaller guys that were coming out at that time, with this job, and all these fine folks. Which eventually led me to not only that, but starting from that famous moment that started everything, I ended up starting homebrewing because, well, beer is pretty expensive to buy, and when you as a science student in university, you're like, hey, what can I do to cut corners and be a little bit cheaper here? So I started making my own stuff, which wasn't really good at the beginning. I got better at it, hopefully. And eventually, one night I was actually, I think I told that story in our Mondial interview as well, but for the people that were not there at that time, I'm going to repeat it a little bit. It was one night that I gotten back home after a very long day at university. I think I was there for like 16 or 17 hours doing mass spectrometry. Nothing was working. You know what? I need to kick back, relax. I used to live on top of a small dépanneur on the corner of Bélanger and Christophe Caron at that time. I grabbed a pack of Saint-Ambroise mix pack, which was a funkier mix pack that they had for a while, which had, I think, if I recall correctly, the double IPA, Scotch Ale, and a bunch of other things in there. It was like a holiday special pack. And I go home and knock back to my first double IPA ever. This is pretty good. I didn't really take a look and much into it what was in there. It turns out it was an 8% beer, and I knocked like 2 or 3 back to back. So, and at the end of that night, that's actually when I started homebrewing myself, because I was sitting there drinking those. Like, this is fantastic. And you know what, guys? I think this is what I want to do in life. So I decided that I was going to become a brewer. So overnight, taught myself how to brew. Got a couple of my friends involved to pitch in some money so we can buy brewing equipment, and then got the whole venture started. Fast forward a couple of years after that, we ended up, I ended up graduating from a biochemistry degree, which, you know, I did it. But what I really wanted to do was to work in the brewing industry, which led me to land a job as a brewer for Vox&Hops, which I did for 5 years. And then when the opportunity for a leadership position presented itself with McAuslan, onwards I went. And that's the way I've been for the past 2 years. I think I answered a look at that question in quite a bit of length there.
That's perfect. You answered my next question as well, which is good. But that's a beautiful path, you know, going from picking up that mix pack and reaching in and picking up an 8% double IPA, enjoying a few of them, and then having a good idea. You know, inspiration comes when you're inebriated sometimes. And look at your life path. And then you ended up landing a job with a giant of Boreal, and now moving on to McAuslan. It's amazing. Speaking of McAuslan, Vox&Hops is all about hanging out with my metal friends and brewer friends and talking about their lives, talking about some music, and talking about craft beer, of course. What beer do we have here? Philippe-Alexandre, present this to everyone, please.
Our Double New England IPA. It's out in the grocery stores and dépanneurs and wherever you'd find your good craft beer. It's a twist on our regular New England IPA. Obviously, it's a double, so it's quite a bit more alcoholic. But it's mostly also, we use slightly different hops in this one. Instead of the more classical Mosaic, Citra, and Galaxy combo that we have in our original NEIPA, this one has, if I recall correctly, which I do, Azacca, Citra, Eldorado, and also last year we used a hop from a brewer in France called Barbe Rouge, which was a lot fruity, a lot of fruitiness to it, mango a little bit. This year we had a bit of a luck in landing a significant amount of Sabro, which is sort of the 2019 craze hop for everyone. Yes. Which is what we put in there. So it's gonna go into flavors closer to pineapple, coconut, vanilla a little bit. We got a little bit of a sort of, and that's coming from the Sabro that has that little thing of oak agey thing that's in the back of you. Like, what's going on with this? But it's definitely a beer that keeps on giving, and it's really, really good. So, well, you're a little bit ahead of me there.
That's okay. I'll talk about it. It looks delicious. It has a nice haze to it. It clocks into that sneaky 8.6%. So everyone that's enjoying it, when they enjoy one themselves, be careful. Cheers. Yeah.
It's
super
also
clean. Little boozy bite.
Smooth.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, those tropical fruits, and I love me some Sabro. It's basically the coriander of hops. Either people love it or they hate
That's true. That's true. Other people would be like, it tastes like soap. You know, that's
it.
true.
But I love it. I love Sabro. This is great. Very very cool. Let's talk about brewing for a huge brewery because
Yeah.
it's different than being, a small brew pub where you can be you have less like nostalgia to live up to, less history to live up to. It's basically like you've stepped in and you've replaced a long-standing vocalist in a metal band, let's say, and you got to go up there every night and play the hits, but you got to play them properly. So when
Yeah.
people go and pick up their oatmeal stout from Saint Alboise, which is a classic brew here in
Yeah,
Montreal
exactly.
and around the rest of the province and in Ontario now, you're saying, you have to do it right. You have to do it justice. So tell me about that, how you deal with the pressure of keeping the beers consistent to the previous recipes.
Luckily enough, we still have our, because I'm not, sorry about that. I'm not the master brewer for McAuslan. We still have David Brophy that's been there for 30 years at this point.
Very
He
cool.
used to be the brewer, then the head brewer, and then he became the master brewer for that brewery. So that's my boss, and a bit for the most part my mentor as well. I look up to him for a lot of things, and there's one thing that he always said: it's you're only as good as your last brew. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter what you need to do, but you got to make that beer, you got to make it perfect. You don't get a pass. So it's a lot of pressure, obviously, as you said. It's a lot of doing the right thing and having the right mindset. Now, being a bigger brewer, we also have a lot of quality control. We have a lot of things that we know in terms of data, in terms of looking at lab results or as different points in the process to know exactly where we're going, or do we need to correct this parameter? Do we need to fix that? How are we going to do this? So um, this is sort of how I deal with it, is in the sense that I take all the information that I have and I make the best decisions that I can. And have the chance of working next door to a guy that's been brewing that beer for 30 years. So he knows most inside and out what's going on there. But that being said, I often have to take decisions, and those are done in the optics of keeping the product safe, keeping everything as it needs to be, because people have been, like as I said, people have been drinking that beer for 30 years. They're expecting it to be exactly what they've been having for the last 30 years. So yeah, that's that. And at the end of the day, it very much is a team effort. If okay, put it that as the head brewer, I'm not the one per se making the beer. It's going to be the brewer, it's going to be the filter operators, all the guys that are working in my team to make that beer. At any point in time, if someone makes a mistake, then it could impact the product. So my job is mostly to make sure that the guys are doing the right job, and they know that very well, and they're very dedicated. And I'm glad that I have the team that I have, because they're fantastic.
Wow, that's monstrous, monstrous.
Yeah.
Huge brewery. I love it. I love it. How do you feel that you guys get to stay creative in this aspect? It's sort of like, as a musician, we have like a certain parameter that we need to stay within
Yeah.
when we are writing a new record, to respect our previous records and our previous fans' appreciation of those records. You guys have to stay within certain boundaries of the styles of beer that you guys have been making. Do you ever feel that you how do you guys dabble in creativity?
To be fair, on that level, it's the craft beer in the industry revolves very often around I don't want to say fads, but it's a little bit like that. Like there's going to be that one hip thing that everybody's doing, and if you don't do it, then you're going to miss out. So it's kind of orienting itself towards what are the hopheads saying, or what are the beer nerds being all hyped about, which on Hopper was one of those things. And then we take a good look at what's going on, and then we make a beer that's going to be our take on that style. Very often we're going to have that talk of, well, this is what we'd like to brew, but we're going to make it our way. So we're going to have our signature to it. For instance, our NEIPA, for the first few brews, the beers that we've done of that beer, we tried to use the McAuslan yeast, which is the same yeast that we've been using for 30 years. didn't work out too well. We tried. We reverted to using different approach, different yeast, other things that we've reworked the recipe a few times, with the main optic being that we had quality up at the forefront of it, because we wanted to be able to brew that beer, and we wanted to be able to brew it right every single time that we were making it. Which is, for anybody that's been brewing NEIPAs out there, they know it's not easy. So, because they're really very much monsters on their own right, and they tend to do a lot of things that you wouldn't expect in the first place. In terms of creativity, very often too, we're looking to work with a lot of really, really good quality ingredients. And if you take just the time to look at the number of hops that have come out in the last few years, last year I had the chance of going to visit John I. Haas, which is one of the bigger hop producers out there, and they buttered us up for a week with all the new hops that were coming up, all the new things that are trying. I don't want to say that it's a little bit easier than it used to be to design and stay creative in this industry, but we're given so much potential, and there's so much new ingredients that are coming out all the time, that you have the chance to just experiment something and try it, and then all of a sudden it works and it makes a fantastically good beer. So
it's really cool. It's almost like you're a painter, and every year there's new colors for you to use.
Yeah, basically.
Very, very, very interesting. I want to talk about some of the brews that I believe that are the strongest brews that I consistently still buy from McAuslan are the Russian Imperial Stout.
Yeah,
I buy a case every year because I love it. It comes it comes in these tubes. It's super cool, and it comes with glassware. I have way too many St. Arbois glasses, but I love it. Let's talk a little bit about that beer and what it means for the brewery and for yourself.
So this is actually the Russian Imperial Stout is a beer that I wanted to have you and I drink tonight. Unfortunately, as you mentioned it, the tube that each bottle comes in, we've had a bit of an issue with our suppliers for that one. They've had problems on their production line, so we ended up having delays, and we wouldn't be able to package them in time. They're actually going to be put in those tubes tomorrow, just so that we had to talk tonight. So
it's okay.
But no, we've got a pretty darn good replacement. I'm not ashamed at all. Now, that beer, it's as the head brewer for McAuslan, it's the second year that I'm involved in the brewing of that beer. Every year it's a little bit different. It's a sort of a different monster every time. But not that we change the recipe all that much, is that there's always slight variations. Maybe the different malts that year, or the malters are not going to have exactly the same characteristics. Sometimes we tweak it a little bit. We don't necessarily, depending on our system of working, we might get a little bit more evaporation, a little bit less. That beer is also aged on oak, so sometimes that will impart slightly different characteristics. And it's been sort of a new beer every time that we brewed it, without being going outside of its box, as we were describing earlier. We're keeping the spirit of that beer very much true to its own thing, but there's always a little bit of variation. And it's been brewed since 2001, I believe. So it's also quite a bit of a legacy to live to, because you're always expecting to, it has to be, because without going into too much of a tangent here, that beer is only brewed, we make one batch every year.
Really?
So it's that one batch that goes into all those bottles, the kegs that we have, and it's basically a hit or miss. Like, if beer is not good, well, that's the one we brewed, so we can't have that. And hasn't happened since I was there, so.
No. Your scientific mind will keep it safe.
Oh yeah, for sure. And some sort of passion education too. If I need to sleep under the fermenter to make sure that it's treated properly, trust me, I will. And yeah, and it was kind of interesting. I'll now take that for my on my shoulders a little bit, but my boss David said last year it was one of the best ones he had made at this point, and this year he said this one is even better than the one from last year. So pretty happy about it.
Very clever.
The one
very excited to get my case.
No, yeah, no, you're not going to be disappointed. The one that's coming out now, I think it'll be for everyone that's pre-ordered it. It will be released in a week and a half or so, maybe 2 weeks from now. and it's going to be released in the stores in about 3 to 4 weeks at this time.
Perfect.
And basically what we have for this year is a beer that's very obviously very roasted, very malt forward. Obviously, this is what you expect from Russian Imperial Stout. Has also a very pronounced black licorice taste, so it's very, very liquory. It is smooth and dark and roasted and just all the crazy goodness that you would expect from that kind of beer. So I'm really proud of it. I'm really happy about it, and I love it. That's why I kind of wanted to have that beer tonight, but it happens.
I also really enjoyed you guys were doing it. I'm not sure if you're still doing it though. You had a barrel aged series coming out in much bigger bottles, the 750 ml bottles.
Yeah.
There was a Scotch ale. There was a few other ones that came around.
Yeah, that's I don't think we did it this year, but it's something that we will be working on in the future again. Especially that it's something that it's kind of a secret, but it's kind of not a secret at the same time. We're working on setting up a distillery. So in the future, where we were talking about maybe of having beers that we will age in our own whiskey barrels from the distillery that we will have done. So yeah,
very cool.
Kind
very
of the
cool
stuff that we're going to do. We're really much looking into, and it's something that as an industry we've had to do because there's a few ways that you can do is either you always release the new product and you're always putting out new beers on the market, or you can diversify your production and be making beers, ciders, strong alcohol, and all kinds of stuff. And that's more the route that we took as a way of being more of a overall, we brew pretty much everything that we want or we can do. So that's sort of why that's the kind of spirit that we're under now. It's lots and lots of I would say adventure going on there. We always have more things to figure out and new things to work on and new toys to play with. So yeah.
Very interesting.
Lots of that.
Shitty question, but I gotta ask it. The Diacetyl.
I knew it.
you have to ask it.
You
have to ask it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
For people that don't know what that is, it is it something in the yeast that tastes like butter? Okay. Do I have that understood properly?
Yeah. You have so essentially all yeast produce diacetyl. It's part of their of the yeast is a form of mushroom that will digest sugars and turn it into alcohol. So part of that process, part of that biochemical pathway, somewhere about halfway in the middle, it will make diacetyl. And that will build up in the beer. And at the end of the fermentation, when the yeast doesn't have sugar to eat up, it's going to chew out that diacetyl. Now, the challenge with the McAuslan yeast and why it's part of our signature in a lot of the ales that we do, and in almost all the ales that we do, except on the Gendron IPA, if you find diacetyl in there, I'll challenge you because I see the lab results and I know there aren't any. Now, jokes aside, the diacetyl essentially gets digested or reabsorbed by the yeast at the end of the fermentation. If it's not in, pardon me, no, if it's in not too much of a high concentration. Now we have a yeast that's very, very expressive, so it tends to produce a lot, and it takes a long while before it chews it all back out. And sometimes the fermentation will stop and the yeast will percolate out, so fall outside of the beer essentially, and not digest it out anymore. So it's always a little bit of a trial and error and a lot of control that has to be applied to the process to try and minimize it. But it's also part of our signature. We're very proud of having a yeast that's that expressive, because it'd be easy to make a beer and not have something like that. But again, you wouldn't have the kind of signature that we have. And for instance, you were talking about a bit earlier how the Saint Humboldt Pale Ale is, which has been our staple for 30 years. It's a hoppy beer. It's actually almost as hoppy as our IPA, but because it's not dry hop and because there's a bit more of the diacetyl left in that beer, it will round off the taste and it doesn't taste as bitter as it really is. Because on average, it rounds up around 40 IBUs, so it's not, well, RP is 55, but it's 35 to 40, so it's for the pale ale. So it's pretty high for just a blonde ale, but it's what gives it its taste and it's what gives it its more well-rounded flavor. It kind of just mellows everything down, and it can really, really enhance the flavor if you don't have too much in it. Now, I agree sometimes and that's part of the magic of this thing is sometimes the yeast will do its thing, and then all of a sudden you have to deal with a beer that's a lot higher in diacetyl. So what do we do with that? Then we have some tricks that we can employ, either raise the temperature of the fermentation, let it run for a little bit longer, blend it out, worst case scenario, we can mix 2 batches together to try and get it down a little bit. But most of the time, it comes out as we want it to be, and it's as it's the challenge is not having to play around afterwards. It's to have to make it right the first time around, and I mean that's what it is. And our yeast, being what the monster that it is, we kind of have to work with it, and it's our baby. It's what makes our beers that taste the way they do. So because it's something I've been saying for the last 6 years of my life, since I started working as a brewer, is the brewers, they don't make the beer. We make sweet cereal juice, and that's what we do. Then the yeast will make the beer, and it will make the beer that it wants to make. So whatever it likes, it's going to do it. And then you have to either you live with the consequences. You don't like the product you put there, and you don't have faith in it, or you roll with it. You take what the yeast gives you, and you're proud of it. And that's more our mentality as a brewer.
Very cool. That's true too. And do you think that McAuslan had to, because there was a lot of flack a few years ago about the Diacetyl.
Yeah.
Has your relationship to it changed since then in the brewery, and like were they more aware of it, or were they always aware of it?
And they're always aware of it. It's always been part of the. I would say, and I don't want to blame anyone for this, but for a while it was kind of the hip term that was going around because everybody was learning about it, so they all knew what it was, and then they started pointing or calling us out on it. But diacetyl is only a defect in the beer if you don't want it to be there and it's there. If you're intentionally having that diacetyl in that beer, then what do you want me to say? Like, we've been brewing this beer for 30 years. People have been drinking it for that long. I don't have much more to say there. I know it has diacetyl in it. It's supposed to have it. When it doesn't have it, it doesn't taste the right way. So,
let's dance into metal, because you are a metal brewer, and I love that. Tell me about your metal journey. What were the first metal bands that you started listening to, Philippe-Alexandre?
Oh boy. As we went to discuss a little bit before, my taste in metal goes more on the power metal side of things. So when I think it was in high school, I had this guy that was listening to all different kinds of things. We started hanging out together, and he was just like, "Hey man, listen to this," and he slaps his huge headphones on my head. And I think he was playing. I don't remember what it was. It was either some Pantera or Manowar, and then he got into the more like the more lyrically intense stuff. Because it's all the same guy that introduced me to all these bands, and then I got stuck with those. And then I fell in love with Blind Guardian, which is one of my favorite bands ever. Which is very fantasy power metal ballads that are just really, really good, and musically it's phenomenal. I've seen them live a few times, and they're trying to put on a show there, but it's the crowd that sings all the songs. So what do you want them to do?
Oh, I missed that feeling.
Yeah. I mean, for you guys, I suppose you really haven't been going around playing live for a little bit after that.
No, it won't be coming for quite some time too.
Yeah.
So. So take me to when you guys are brewing. Is there music playing, and if there is, what is that brewer's playlist?
Boy. When I was a brewer a few years back, because the thing is, especially with all the stuff that's going on in our size of brewery, we don't really play music at the same time. Mostly because we have all that system going on, and it's going to give you different alarms, different things. You don't really have the luxury of being able to have nothing going on, because we have like 4 batches going on at the same time. So we need to have the sound cues that the system is giving us, so that we can catch, okay, we're at this step of the process on this batch, so this has to be done that way. Otherwise, if you miss it, and a lot of brewers that I know will tell you, it's like, if you hear the system doing something, you'll know which valve just opened because of the sound that it makes. If you don't catch that, then you're not going to know where you are. You're going to lose your bearings a little bit. But yeah, so but then again, What I used to be when I was working as a brewer for L'Oréal, especially on the night shift where you're alone in the brewery and you're just like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna crank it out. There's no one here anyways, and I'm the only guy that's working. So we had that sound system in the brewer's office, and that was a good time for the 14 minutes power ballads from Blind Garden, like, and then there was silence and those crazy long songs that you're just like, you know what? I have 20 minutes before I need to do that next thing. Let's put on the metal and just relax for a bit. I say that, but that's not really not true for most brewers. Like if you manage to sit 5 minutes, you're good. Because usually you're just going to be up on your feet and run around and do something else while there's other things going.
Very cool. Very, very cool. How about a potential, having visited and being at the Terrace, has there ever been live music that has been happened at the Terrace? Or ever been a show out there?
We usually, not at the Terrace, not that I know of. Usually it's mostly music that's pre-recorded that's going to play on out on the Terrace. But we do have live music on at DNX, but it's mostly DJs that will come in and spin some records and get some mixes going on, and yeah, that's mostly what's been going on there. But I mean, it has the setting for it, so I wouldn't be. It would be a fantastic venue, I'm not gonna lie. So it's something that we could probably definitely look into in the future. You know what? I'll drop a word to the guy that manages there and see what he says about it.
I think it would be fun. You know, a circle pit in Lennox might be a little small, but the Terrace could work.
But it's not like we didn't have a football field right on the side, so
yeah. And how about doing collaborations? Is that something that happens at a brewery that big? I know a lot of small brewers, they tend to collaborate together. How about when you are at a level as big as McAuslan?
Yeah, I know we really haven't. We've been talking with different people to see what we could do and how it would work out. The problem is when we are the size that we are, it can be really difficult because our production schedule is really packed. Because we have that many, I think 27 or 29 different beers that we brew. And so whenever we don't have the luxury of having a smaller system to brew on. I mean, that was not true until a few years ago, because now we have the brew pub at Lennox that we can actually brew different things and have a little bit more of a creative outlet if we want to. But even that, there's a lot of stuff going on that level, and because of COVID, because of all the stuff that's been going on for this year, I know we had a few projects going on and things that we wanted to do that we had to put on hold because we don't know where the market's going. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. Everything is sort of up in the air right now. But as a bigger brewer, it's pretty difficult to really sit down and say, okay, we're going to brew a collaboration with this guy, because all of a sudden then I can't make anything that's smaller than 12,000 liters. So
taking a big risk.
So, or at least 60, or at least 6,000 liters. So it's a lot of volume. It's a lot of, but anyway, numbers aside, or 5,100, 51 hectoliter. Okay, I'm getting my conversions all wrong, but that's fine. It's getting late anyways. Math has never been too much of my forte. So, but what I meant to say is it can be difficult for us to squeeze that in, because you're thinking, okay, well, we want to do that one shot, we want to get visibility out there, want to have some good fun with the other brewers and just get people in and brew something. But it becomes a question of, are we we're doing it at your place, are we doing it at our place? How do we squeeze that in, and whoever's schedule where we're doing that? So it's something that as a bigger brewer, we don't have as much of a luxury to be able to do. And I'm a little bit envious of the smaller guys, because I wish I could just turn my production schedule around and squeeze something in there and be like, hey, you know what? Today we're brewing a saison. That's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately,
we have a big market that's expecting certain products, and that we end up producing a lot based on what our inventories are like, and so in our forecast, and then we have to match that number, because if we get orders and we don't have the beer, then people are not going to buy from us again. So it's a bit of a tricky balance to always maintain and make sure that you're in the right range for all the stuff that you need to do. So yeah, it's a collab. I wish I could. It definitely will happen in the future. It's just a question of figuring out how and the details of all the stuff that needs to be worked on, which can be a bit tricky.
Let's wrap this up with a classic wrap-up question. Philippe-Alexandre, probably never happens to you because you're very in control. You always know what's up. It probably didn't happen to you after those 3 8% double IPAs all those years ago, but it happens to everyone every once in a while. What is your hangover cure?
Oh boy. Yeah, a lot of people will say, oh, they have to eat a poutine after they had one too many the night before. I'm more on the lighter food kind of deal. I have my coffee and a couple of fruits, like a banana and a pear, and the lighter stuff that's my stomach's gonna take well. And most importantly is dehydration. So often enough, you finish the coffee, you move on to the Gatorade or the carbonated water, and that's usually what sets me back up.
Awesome.
I mean, prevention is mother of all virtue, but it's gonna happen one day that you're just gonna slip. And oh, hey, we do some pretty darn decent beer, so sometimes.
Sometimes it's dangerous, just like this one.
This is out of curiosity.
Oh, I suffer in silence, as everyone knows. I have 2 young children that don't let me rest. So I wake up and do what I have to do and suffer in silence most of the time. Thank you so much, Philippe-Alexandre, taking the time to have a chat with me, sharing Explosion, the Double New England IPA. And it was a true pleasure. And everyone, please go and check out and make sure you buy that Russian Imperial Stout. I can say that for sure. I'm going to be drinking a bunch of those and sharing those, and they're perfect gifts. And
oh yeah, that's fantastic. That's usually what I do. It's my Christmas gift for all my family too. So
cheers, Philippe-Alexandre. Cheers.
Have a good one, man.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you all so much for listening right to the end. You know that I love and appreciate that. I would probably not be here if it wasn't for McAuslan Brewing. So reaching out to them and asking them to be on the podcast was something that was very important to me. They are basically the foundation of my craft beer house, and I'm very, very stoked to have had the chance to pick Philippe-Alexandre's brain for a bit. I have subsequently tasted that Russian Imperial Stout, and it is absolutely delicious. And if you can get some, you should absolutely do that because you will enjoy it. I hope you guys have a great weekend. If you enjoyed this Vox and Hops episode, you should go and subscribe to it on the podcast platform of your choice. But not only that, you should absolutely rate it and write a written review for it, because if you do that, more people like you will be able to discover the podcast. Vox and Hops is brought to you by Sound Talent Media. I will be back next week with 2 episodes, but until then, remember to enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. Cheers, Vox and Hops heads.